Hello and welcome to Hare Investigations. I'm your host, Anna Rucco. The Dark History of Fort Riggs. Now, special thanks to Rome Sweet Rome for helping me pick the idea for this video, and for Sinister for helping me with my investigations. Fort Riggs. Fort Riggs is an abandoned holding camp in the Big Valley region of West Elizabeth. Fort Riggs is comprised of several abandoned teepees and a ruined schoolhouse surrounded by a ruined wooden fence. There is a mass graveyard behind the fort along the road, and 3 more graves in the front. A single cabin is located outside the fenced area. A single decorated grave is located just over the hill from the fort. Now, from time to time, the map will label this location as F.T. Riggs Holding Camp, a clear reference to this being a holding camp for the Native Americans forcibly held here. Drunk Camp Veteran. During the game, you can have a random encounter with a drunk stranger. If you give the stranger a bottle of whiskey, the stranger will then tell the player his story. The stranger is a U.S. Army veteran who used to be stationed at Fort Riggs. Not much is known about the man, except that he is a former United States Army soldier that was stationed at Fort Riggs. The man states that he has committed sins and will reveal them if you give him some whiskey. The veteran says he used to be a soldier stationed at Fort Riggs. He reveals that many Native Americans were suppressed and held in captivity in the fort. The veteran also claims that the American military eventually killed many Indians at the fort. He still remembers the Native Americans as clearly as yesterday and feels bad for them. The drunk will also tell you that he feels sleepy and takes one last swig of the whiskey, then falls off the chair and passes out. You can loot a Native American ring from him that he probably kept from the killed Native Americans worth $10, or $347 in 2022. The Mass Graveyard at Fort Riggs. The mass grave located at the back of the fort along the road has 21 graves marked with wooden crosses. This does support the veterans' claims to the killing of the Native Americans. I tried to find a pattern or symbol from the grave locations, but was unable to detect anything. Maybe someone else can. The 3 graves in front of the fort. There are 3 graves in front of the fort that differ from those in the mass grave. One is marked with a wooden cross, whereas the other 2 have wooden borders around them. It could mean that these graves belong to soldiers that died at the fort. The schoolhouse. This building appears to be a schoolhouse or an education facility of some kind. Rows of benches, a desk at the front, and a ruined chalkboard give the impression of this. An English spelling practice paper can be found here, also supporting this idea. The front desk holds a chilling clue to add. 5 bullet casings are located next to the vase. Now, most sidearms used by the military during this time were single action. As a result, most single-action revolvers were only loaded with 5 bullets, leaving the empty chamber in the firing position. This practice made the gun safer to carry since the firing pin was not resting on a live round and accidentally go off in the holster. Pottery can be found in the schoolhouse as well as around the fort that resembles Native American-styled pottery. A set of shackles can be found under one of the back benches. Since we know this was a schoolhouse used for educating the Native Americans, it would seem this was being done by force. In the schoolhouse of the fort, you can find a letter that contains the correct spelling of a variety of English words. If you take the first letter of each word, the following poem emerges. Wazia comes with winter breath. His trees stand guard. Whispering all night that we sleep in our grave. Father fought and died so quickly. Mother died slowly. Before we get into the poem, we need to know who Wazia is. This is a description based on Lakota metaphysics. Wazia, blower from snow pines, the old man or wizard who received his godlike nature from Iktomi, and is therefore doomed to a lonely immortal life on earth. A giant who guarded the entrance to the place of the aurora borealis. He fights against the south winds with his cold, icy breath. He also brings famine and diseases, also said to be the purifier, the first man banished to the earth as the wizard. Now the poem could have many possible meanings. After researching Lakota lore and beliefs, this is what it means to me. Now, I'm not saying I'm right by any means, this is just what I think it might mean. Wazia comes with winter breath. Winter would bring famine and sickness. His trees stand guard. The walls of the fort stand upright, much like trees standing guard. Also, it could possibly mean that the walls of the fort were made from pine. Whispering all night, the sound of the wind passing through the fort. That we sleep in our grave. The fort represents their grave since so many knew they would die there. Father fought and died so quickly. Most of the male Native Americans died in battle. Mother died slowly. Most women and children died from starvation, sickness, or exposure. So this poem may have been written as a story or record of what happened to the Native Americans that were being held at the fort. The Solo Grave. Not far from Fort Riggs is a single decorated grave. It is decorated with a single human skull, feathers, various bones, and a set of buffalo horns. This single grave is not viewable from within the fort itself. This single grave is different than the ones located at the mass grave, as it is decorated and not just a plain wooden cross. The fact that it has a decorated marker of Native American qualities would suggest that the person buried here might have been someone of great importance, such as a chief. Native American burial practices vary and include traditional earth burial, air burial, in which bodies are left in the open, burial under mounds or rocks, and tree burial. In pre-reservation times, bodies of the deceased were dressed in their best clothes, wrapped in hides or a blanket, and placed on a scaffold along with weapons and other personal items. Wait, a scaffold? Now where have I seen that before? The position of the grave is significant because of the burial ceremonies of the Native Americans. Above all, the ceremonial beliefs and funeral customs are meant to show respect and reverence for those who have passed, in a mourning process that may last up to a year. This respect is often expressed through grief. However, since this grave was placed outside the fort over a small hill, none would be able to see the grave. This meant no mourning could be shown. This act may have been done in an effort to separate the tribe that was being held at the fort from their leader. However, since no one was able to mourn the deceased nor help it cross into the spirit world, it may still linger at Fort Riggs. The Ghost Light at Fort Riggs. If you stand on the hill on a foggy night and look down at the schoolhouse in Fort Riggs, you will notice that there is a light illuminating the front portion of the building. When you look through binoculars, you can see the illumination is being produced by a single point of light. However, as you move closer to the schoolhouse, the light grows dimmer and dimmer till it eventually goes out completely. From the inside, the light would be located somewhere between the red lines. However, after using various techniques, I was unable to find the light source like I did when we investigated the phantom light south of St. Denis. So based on all the clues I was able to gather, this is what I pieced together. A group of Native Americans was forcibly transported to Fort Riggs and detained. They were held with minimal food and supplies and were forced to endure difficult weather conditions. As the Native Americans were forced to learn at the schoolhouse, winter had been just around the corner. It is then that the poem may have been written by a child. In the poem it tells of a father dying quickly. This may be the lone grave we find outside the fort. As a result, many more were killed or died from the harsh conditions or starvation and have been buried in a mass grave. The fort was deserted and left to the elements. However, one or more ghosts still appear to haunt the old schoolhouse, possibly still reading the English practice sheet even in death. Regardless of the fort's true meaning, this is still a harsh reminder of the treatment of the Native American people throughout the United States history.